Welcome to Hockey Wiz Talks podcast. Today I'll be talking about my observations from the first round of the NHL playoffs. The series between the Philadelphia Flyers and Montreal Canadiens has been spectacular. Both goalies, Carey Price and Carter Hart, have been phenomenal and have been as advertised. The Montreal Canadiens are not playing like an 8th seed. They are really dictating the pace of the game, and for most of the series, with the exception of Game 4, have really outplayed the Flyers. The story of the series is Carter Hart of the Philadelphia Flyers. Despite being the number 1 seed and having a high-powered offense, they have relied heavily on Carter Hart to steal some games for them, and that he did, shutting out the Montreal Canadiens in back-to-back games. The Montreal Canadiens are a team that need everyone to contribute offensively, but the players they really needed to get going were Brendan Gallagher and Thomas Tatar, and Gallagher especially has been wreaking havoc around the goal all series long. The Philadelphia Flyers, despite being in the lead in the series, have not played all that well. They haven't been a dominant team at all. In fact, at times, the Montreal Canadiens seem to be outplaying the Philadelphia Flyers. At the end of Game 5, you saw the rivalry really start to heat up, and the bad blood should spill over to Game 6, which should be a very interesting game. The Tampa Bay Lightning and Columbus Blue Jackets are almost polar opposites of one another. The Lightning are a highly skilled, high-scoring team, while the Blue Jackets are a bruising, well-structured, defensive-oriented team. Despite being the lower seed in the series, the Blue Jackets have not looked like a lower seed at all. In fact, at times, they completely controlled the pace of the game and prevented the Lightning from generating high-quality scoring chances. Game 1 was a game for the ages, as the game went to 5 overtimes before Braden Point won it for the Lightning. A few records were set in the game, including Jonas Korpisalo setting the NHL record for saves in a single game with 74, and Seth Jones setting a new record for time on ice in a single game with a little over 65 minutes on ice. Despite the crushing loss in Game 1, the Blue Jackets showed resilience and bounced back to beat the Lightning in Game 2 4-1. Perhaps the fatigue started to set in for the Blue Jackets after Game 3 because the Blue Jackets seemed to be a few steps slower to the pucks. Not only that, but there were many times during the games that the defense was out of position, which is abnormal for the Blue Jackets. The Tampa Bay Lightning's best line all series long was the Yanni Gourde line, which included Blake Coleman and Barclay Goodrow. This line was a big reason why they were able to win the series. Moving forward, if they want to continue to have a success, they will need their second line of Anthony Cirelli, Tyler Johnson, and Alex Killorn to step up. The Tampa Bay Lightning avenged their loss in last year's playoffs by knocking out the same team in the playoffs this year. Moving forward, this will give the Tampa Bay Lightning the confidence that they can beat anybody. And now a word from our sponsor. Check out my hockey blog at hockeywiztalkshockey.blogspot.com. The most lopsided matchup in the Eastern Conference is between the New York Islanders, coached by ex-Washington Capitals head coach Barry Trotz, and the Washington Capitals, coached by head coach Todd Reirden. It really comes down to Todd Reirden getting outcoached by Barry Trotz, as his team doesn't really have an answer for what the Islanders are doing. Judging from the games I have seen so far, it seems like the New York Islanders are the top seed, while the Capitals look like the overwhelmed underdog. One of the toughest things about facing a Barry Trotz team is that they are so structured and they rarely make mistakes, so beating them would require a lot of discipline and structure. The Washington Capitals have struggled mightily on the power play without Nicklas Backstrom, who has been missing in action since the Anders Lee hit. Without Nicklas Backstrom, their power play is not as efficient. It is very static, and it hasn't been a factor in the series thus far. The Islanders won Games 1 and 2 decisively, then won Game 3 in overtime to take a commanding 3-0 lead in the series. The Islanders held a high-scoring Capitals team to a total of 5 goals in the series up till Game 4, a true testament to their defensive prowess. The Washington Capitals at times have looked flat-out terrible, which makes it much easier on the Islanders to play their game. The defensive zone coverage has looked sloppy, and the Capitals have made too many turnovers. The great thing about the Islanders is that they are accustomed to rolling 4 lines, so they don't have to depend on a few players to score, which is why the Islanders are a team that are built for playoff success. Alex Ovechkin put his team on his back to help the Washington Capitals stage off elimination in Game 4. If the Capitals don't want to go home, marquee players such as Evgeny Kuznetsov and John Carlson have to be driving forces. The series between the Boston Bruins and Carolina Hurricanes had been a very exciting matchup in the Eastern Conference. Both teams are capable of playing in a low-scoring, tight-checking game, but at the same time, they are also capable of running up the score. Before the series, there were questions with regards to which Boston Bruins team would show up, the one during the regular season or the one during the round robin. Those questions were quickly erased as the Boston Bruins found their game and flat out dominated the Carolina Hurricanes. The Carolina Hurricanes actually played pretty well in the series. Unfortunately, the Boston Bruins are probably the most complete team in the Eastern Conference and have more playoff experience. Playing without top goal scorer David Pastrnak for games 2, 3, and 4, the Boston Bruins still managed to win games 3 and 4. In addition, Tuukka Rask opted out before game 3, leaving the Bruins to start Yaroslav Halak for the rest of the playoffs. David Pastrnak returned in Game 5 in a big way and picked up 2 points, while David Krejci continued their dominant play. For the Carolina Hurricanes, the loss of Andrei Svechnikov was huge, because beyond Aho, Svechnikov, and Teravainen, the Canes don't have anyone that scores consistently. Over the course of the series, the Boston Bruins found their game and at times overwhelmed the less physical and less experienced Hurricanes. Once the Boston Bruins found their game, the Hurricanes had no answer for it, and it resulted in the Boston Bruins knocking the Carolina Hurricanes out of the playoffs once again. And now a word from our sponsor. Visit my Facebook page, Mr. HockeyWiz777, and my Instagram, Mr. HockeyWiz77. As predicted, the Vegas Golden Knights dominated the Chicago Blackhawks in their best-of-7 series, and they might have swept them if not for the outstanding goaltending of Corey Crawford in Game 4. The Golden Knights' best line all series long was the one with Jonathan Marchessault and Riley Smith. The line was centered by Paul Stastny for games 1, 2, and 5, but with Paul Stastny unavailable for games 3 and 4, William Karlsson played on that line. Other than that line, the rest of their team has chipped in offensively as well and have done a tremendous job slowing down Toews and Kane. The Chicago Blackhawks had trouble scoring in this series against the Vegas Golden Knights due to the Golden Knights' defense and shot blocking. Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews were relatively quiet in this series, and the players that stepped up in the series against the Oilers, like DeBrincat, Doc, and Kubalik, weren't as effective against the more physical Vegas team. It's not surprising to see Vegas move on in this series because they dominated the time of possession and generated way more grade A scoring chances than the Blackhawks. The Golden Knights won the first 3 games of the series, pushed Chicago to the brink of elimination, but Corey Crawford was spectacular in Game 4 and stole the game. After knocking out the Chicago Blackhawks, the most glaring issue the Golden Knights need to fix is cutting down on defensive zone turnovers. If they do that, they should be able to make a deep run. The Colorado Avalanche flat out embarrassed the Arizona Coyotes in this series. The Avalanche could have actually blown out the Coyotes in all of the games they played, but Darcy Kemper was a wall in net in the first couple of games. The team speed of the Colorado Avalanche is very apparent, and the Coyotes really had trouble containing it. The Coyotes' defense was simply not a good match against the speed of the Colorado forwards, and it resulted in a very lopsided series. Darcy Kemper was the Arizona Coyotes' best player in this series. He has perhaps been their only good player in this series. Taylor Hall and Phil Kessel were invisible in this series. It's going to be very hard to win a series if your top players don't show up. The Colorado Avalanche have been led in scoring by Nazem Kadri and Nathan MacKinnon, who have both set the tone offensively for Colorado. But Colorado has also had key goals from role players at key moments, which will be very important moving forward. The Arizona Coyotes were completely outmatched in this series. They just weren't in the same league as Colorado. The Avalanche made the Coyotes look like amateurs at times, blowing out the Coyotes in the last 2 games of the series. Whoever faces the Colorado Avalanche in the next round better be on their game, otherwise Colorado will destroy them. And now a word from our sponsor. Check out my other podcasts on soundcloud.com/MrHockeyWiz777. The series between the Dallas Stars and Calgary Flames has been a pretty even series for the most part, with the Calgary Flames winning games 1 and 3 and the Dallas Stars winning games 2 and 4. Although the Dallas Stars were the higher seed in the matchup, they certainly did not look like it in games 1 and 3. In those 2 games, the Stars looked a step slower than the younger and faster Calgary team that played with an edge to their game. The best line for the Calgary Flames has been the one with Dylan Dubé, centering Milan Lucic and Sam Bennett. Dubé has been a major factor with his speed and skill. Lucic has seemingly turned back the clock and is playing his best hockey in years. And Sam Bennett has stepped up his game and is playing at another level. Miro Heiskanen has been the most noticeable player for Dallas and has been arguably their best player thus far. The most consistent line for Dallas has been the line of Cogliano, Faksa, and Como. You know what you're getting with that line. Although that line doesn't score, they keep puck possession in the offensive zone, and they are very good defensively. Corey Perry and Jamie Oleksiak have both stepped up in this series and have chipped in offensively in key moments. Something to look out for as this series progresses is the fatigue factor for the Flames defensemen. Their top 4 logs a ton of minutes, so they might get gassed if they are constantly forced to defend forwards like Jamie Benn, Alex Radulov, and Corey Perry below the goal line and in front of the net. The Dallas Stars started to swing the series in their favor and took Game 5 to put them up in the series 3-2. It would be best for Dallas to close out the series in Game 6 because letting it go to a Game 7 is asking for trouble. For me, the most exciting matchup in the Western Conference has been between the St. Louis Blues and the Vancouver Canucks. You have the young, up-and-coming Vancouver Canucks going up against the defending Stanley Cup champions St. Louis Blues. The first 2 games of the series were dominated by Vancouver as their top players put on a show. Elias Pettersson, Bo Horvat, and Quinn Hughes all put on a show and showed a glimpse of how scary the Canucks' future can be. Down 0-2 in the series, the St. Louis Blues needed to turn things around quickly, and did they ever. The Blues turned to Jake Allen for Game 3, and Binnington hasn't seen the net since. Ryan O'Reilly, David Perron, and Alex Pietrangelo set the tone, and players such as Justin Falk and Jordan Kyrou stepped up. Braden Shen has also stepped up and scored some big-time goals for the Blues. Jacob Markstrom has been spectacular in this series, especially in Games 4 and 5, when his team was outplayed. Vancouver relies heavily on the top 6 forwards for scoring. If they want to beat St. Louis, they will need scoring from unsung heroes, which they got from Jake Virtanen and Tyler Mott in Game 5. The loss of Tyler Myers really hurts because that leaves the Canucks with a third pair of Jordy Benn and Oscar Fantenberg. Something to look out for as this series progresses is the fatigue factor for the Canucks defensemen, as they are relying heavily on 4 defensemen, and that is not smart. And that is not a smart thing to do, going up against a team like the St. Louis Blues. Vancouver came from behind to win in Game 5, which put them up in the series 3-2. But this series is far from over, because I think this series has the potential to go 7 games. In my next podcast, I preview the second round of the 2020 NHL playoffs.